by more people than any other news source. This is 4 News.
A footprint, a tire track, a suspect who failed a polygraph test. Tonight, only on 4, exclusive new information about the Jacob Wetterling case. It's been a frustrating 6.5-year search for Jacob, a kidnapped victim we've never met, but we all feel we know.
Tonight, because this story is so extraordinary, we begin with dimension. WCCO TV looks at a series of suspects in the Wetterling investigation, why authorities first became interested in them, and where they stand now. Trish Van Pilsen takes an exclusive look at court documents never before revealed.
Listen, can you hear the sound singing all the world around?
This is the Jacob Wetterling story as we have come to know it.
Listen, Jacob, can you hear our prayers?
He's drawing.
Everywhere around the world singing always sounds so sweet.
Same age as my son.
But there is an untold story, until now shielded from public view. A story of suspects, each more intriguing than the last.
During the past 7 years, investigators have checked out literally thousands of potential suspects. But there's always been a list of the 3 or 4 most promising. That list changes fairly often. New suspects are added as others are cleared.
Sometimes those people are just eliminated in a matter of minutes. And some of them may never be eliminated to our satisfaction.
Suspect number 1.
They look pure hell.
3 months after the kidnapping, this man topped the list. First, he resembled a composite drawing of a man accused of sexually assaulting a boy in a nearby town earlier that year. And this search warrant shows he owned a car, clothing, and scanner equipment similar to what that victim described. What's more, his shoes matched the footprints left at the spot Jacob was taken, and his car tires matched the tire tracks there as well. The suspect failed a polygraph exam, and he had no alibi for the time of the kidnapping.
Did they ask you where you were the night Jacob was abducted?
That was how many months before?
We talked with the suspect in his car.
I don't keep track of last week or the week before. It's probably home.
He says investigators questioned him for hours in a room like this and displayed several notebooks labeled with his name.
We know it's you, it's you, it's you, it's you, it's you. I know it isn't, no it isn't, no it isn't. Till finally I said I have nothing more to say until I speak to a lawyer.
At that point, he says, he and investigators sat in silence for an hour or so. Then he spent the night in jail. Once he got out, he believes he was put under surveillance, followed for months. Authorities never found any direct physical evidence linking him to the crime, and yet they couldn't completely rule him out either.
You know, the parents just desperately need to know what happened to their boy.
Absolutely, I don't blame them. But there's nothing I can tell them.
And do you have any information about the abduction of Jacob
I have
Wetterling?
no information whatsoever. That's the truth.
Suspect number 2. Authorities zeroed in on him in the first week. He resembled another of the composites.
They showed the composite sketches on TV, and when we saw it, we knew it was him. He knew it was him. He said, they know it's me, or they're coming after me, or something like that.
This woman is the suspect's sister-in-law. She later called police to turn him in.
They were real desperate to interview him.
The suspect had no alibi. In fact, friends saw him 2 hours before the abduction, and then not again until 2 hours after. And he'd been wearing a jacket that night similar to the one described by the boys who were with Jacob. His college roommates in St. Cloud found this poster. Attached to it, a bizarre note. Typewritten, Stage 1, overcoming the want to kill another. Stage 2, it is not impossible to cut one's throat and cry for help at the same time. Stage 3, no one kills themselves who has not wished the death of another. And handwritten, the name Jacob, references to the Wetterlings' obscure religion. And the phrase, in the rose garden, a flower has begun to bloom.
Investigators say they were able to pretty much rule him out after talking with him. His family believes he was mentally ill and fixated on Jacob after the abduction. Last year, he killed himself. He was the second Wetterling suspect to take his own life. The other killed himself within months of being questioned.
Suspect number 3 lived a few miles from Jacob. He told investigators he'd taken Jacob and hidden the boy's clothes in his basement.
Police searched his house. They found no sign of the clothes, no sign of Jacob. Authorities believe he is one of at least 3 people who confessed to the abduction, though they were not involved.
Potential suspect number 4 came from a recent tip.
I was questioned maybe a month and a half ago.
He lived within a mile of the spot Jacob was taken. Acquaintances reported he seemed to know specific details about the abduction, which had not been publicized. He had taken part in the original search for Jacob, even volunteered at the Wetterling Foundation office.
And he didn't hurt Jacob.
No.
Any idea who did?
I have no idea. Little kids don't turn me on, no.
Kids don't turn you on?
No.
They turn
No, I can't. I don't like kids. Not that I'd kill one.
Well, you know anybody who's into kids?
No. I have no idea.
You don't know anybody who's into kids?
No.
Movies of kids, pictures of kids.
Not that I can think of, no.
The next day, police arrested this man for possession of child pornography.
Wouldn't lie to me about Jacob or anything we've talked about
Nope.
today.
Nope, there's no lie at all there. Honest to God, truth.
Okay. Despite the pornography arrest, authorities don't consider him a suspect now. Again, there is no physical evidence linking him to the crime. He's smaller than the boy's description of the suspect, and he says he was home with his family that night.
For 7 years, a stream of leads that has gone nowhere.
We've managed to stay very focused. I told the Sheriff's Department that you'll see me excited, you'll see me emotional when Jacob walks in the door, when this guy's actually caught.
And over time, the focus of the investigation has changed. Clues that once seemed so important aren't anymore.
We have no clue as to what the man looks like. He wore a mask, so disregard any composite drawing. We have no vehicle description at all, none. So disregard any vehicle that previously was put out.
And the focus of the investigation has begun circling closer to home, Jacob's home. It is possible that the man who took Jacob was no stranger at all. As interesting as these suspects were, there is one man who's been on the short list for some time. Police will not talk about him except to say he knows the Wetterling family, he lied about where he was after the abduction, and he painted and sold his vehicle afterwards. There is no mention of him in the small part of the investigative file that has been made public, but in the words of one investigator, they've put a microscope on him.
Is it somebody we know? That's very disturbing. Is it somebody who's still living in St. Joe? I don't know. That's also disturbing, but I do know that we're still going. We're not going to stop.
I can honestly say that there isn't a day that doesn't go by that one of the officers isn't doing something with this case yet today.
Still unclear whether the person who took Jacob is someone investigators have already talked with or someone they don't even know about yet. For Dimension, I'm Trish Van Pilsum.
And tonight, investigators are asking you to think back to the time of the abduction, to anyone you know who might have acted strangely, whose life changed dramatically afterward, who had made perhaps odd comments about Jacob, perhaps even as they watched stories like this one. If you have any information about such a person, please call the Stearns County Sheriff's Office at 320-251-4240. And if you wish to remain anonymous, you can call Crime Stoppers. The Crime Stoppers number is 800-255-1301.
Hello, Jacob Wetterling Foundation.
They still come. Tips, leads, a couple of times a day, 933 days and 40,000 leads after the abduction.
How do you know that? I've seen his poster in the post office.
They are most often now vague and unpromising, and sometimes entirely useless.
You ever seen a show called Starsky and Hutch? Yes. Well, there was one real good show where Hutch got kidnapped.
And most rare is the call with a note of realism, a call that makes investigators drop everything else. The last call like that came on March 15th of this year.
This is Norman. I just want to tell you that Jacob's all right.
But it's the very call we wait for every day.
I'm telling you, Jacob's all right.
The immediacy and the reality of that phone call was something that you just, you just can't deny.
You have Jacob? Yeah.
It came from Utah.
If anything goes wrong, you could be in a world of hurt. Okay, where are you at? I'm in Garland, Utah.
A town so small, more kids bike than bus to school.
Okay, are you going to contact the authorities? I don't know, man. I'm scared. I don't know what to do.
Telephone security traced the call to this phone booth.
Can we speak to him? Yeah, just 1 minute. I'm all right. I'm all right. Okay, where are you at now, Jacob? I don't know. This man's taking the phone from me now.
And, you know, we said it sounds like it could be Jacob, and none of us in our family could say that it wasn't him.
Okay, how you do? He's all right, all right?
A sheriff's detective from Box Elder County, Utah, picked up the search after a call from Wetterling investigators.
They seemed very encouraged. They'd received a call, and they felt like there may be some substance to it.
I'm on a payphone right now, okay?
And in a small community, the chances are fairly good if they weren't just traveling through, so I was optimistic.
While Detective Johnson searched, authorities in Minnesota and the Wetterlings waited, and like so many other leads, it would be days before the Utah call would be resolved. During the course of this investigation, there has been so much waiting.
This is the index.
Investigators interviewed hundreds of people and generated 8,600 pages of reports, but they haven't found Jacob.
We're disappointed, obviously, because we're not used to not succeeding.
Al Garber, veteran FBI agent, headed the Wetterling investigation until he was reassigned this spring.
But my belief is that we haven't talked to the right person. And I believe that we just have not talked to the person who has the information.
But several authorities involved in the case admit the information they need may already be somewhere in the extensive Wetterling files. We examined hundreds of tips called into the Jacob Wetterling Foundation. They've never before been made public. Tips like the one called in by a Kansas City chiropractor who has seen, even posted, Jacob's missing person flyers.
But I've seen his face so many times. He's a face that after a while you just don't forget.
Mike Klein thought he saw Jacob's face at a convenience store, a young boy with an older man in a baseball cap. He said the man wouldn't let go of the boy's hand. He repeatedly called investigators in Missouri and Minnesota. He says nothing happened.
I'm angry. I have a little boy.
Authorities confirmed the lead was not followed.
This was worthy, absolutely worthy of investigation.
And we talked to others who were frustrated their leads hadn't been followed, like a man from Lockport, Illinois, who called the foundation after a stranger tried to abduct his son. The 8-year-old boy had seen a composite drawing of a man wanted in connection with the Wetterling case, and he told his parents that was the man who tried to kidnap him.
It wouldn't have warranted a call to the family.
No.
Again, investigators confirmed they didn't pursue the lead.
But it's a matter of resources.
Yeah, it's a matter of good police work. We can be chasing people that abduct little boys and little girls all over the country.
I really trust that they have followed through the ones that are followable.
But a lot of leads, even if pursued, can't actually be resolved. Investigators and the Wetterlings say they're only thankful that a call as tormenting as the one from Utah could.
Can you bring him to the law enforcement people? I don't know, man. I'll get busted. Can I put you through to his parents? And I gotta go. Bye.
Back in Utah, Detective Johnson traveled all over the county and played a tape of the call to more than a dozen people. Finally, 15 days after the call, a woman said she recognized a voice. It was not the voice of Jacob or the kidnapper. It was her 13-year-old son and a friend, and it was a prank.
We were just doing it for the heck of it.
What do you think about that now?
It was stupid.
What were you thinking?
Let's have fun.
You thought that'd be fun? What do you think about it now?
It's not fun no more. We messed up their lives. Probably brought their hopes up. I want to say I'm sorry. I didn't mean it.
The Utah call was especially tantalizing because a recent mailing of Jacob's missing posters to the area prompted 3 other calls about possible leads in this state. But more than anything, the call captured what has been the roller coaster of this investigation, a roller coaster with very few highs and very deep lows.
Tonight at 10, a look inside the frustrating search for Jacob's kidnapper. We'll show you how investigators tried to tie suspects to the abduction, and we'll take you beyond the police line and show you evidence that's never before been released. For Dimension, I'm Trish Van Pilsum. These are the faces we've all watched for. But they're not suspects, merely drawings of men who acted strangely in the area at the time one sexually abused a boy. No one has seen the face of the man who took Jacob.
To understand why, you have to come back to the road where Jacob disappeared. It was completely dark, no moon, October 22nd, 1989. Jacob's friend and brother saw only a man with a gun wearing all black and a mask. The search for that man has consumed the time of dozens of investigators. Tonight you'll see evidence, never before released, of Jacob's final moments on this road, and you'll see some of the men investigators have watched and questioned in their search for a suspect.
Consider Mark Kilmartin. We met him in a jail near Kansas City. He's awaiting trial on charges he sexually abused 4 teenaged boys in Missouri. At the time Jacob disappeared, Kilmartin lived in Wisconsin, in a small town less than 400 miles from St. Joseph, east on Interstate 94. He's also charged with abusing several preteen and teenaged boys in Wisconsin. What made Kilmartin interesting was some of the evidence seized from his Kansas City house. It included a Jacob Wetterling missing poster.
Investigators can't place Kilmartin anywhere in this area at the time Jacob disappeared, but police records in Kansas City show what at first appeared to be yet another link to the Wetterling case. A friend told police Kilmartin carried a wallet-sized school photo of Jacob. According to the friend, Kilmartin first said the boy was his son, then said the boy was his nephew, and later still said the boy was missing and that he was a detective trying to help with the search.
The lead was enticing. An FBI agent interviewed Kilmartin in jail. Kilmartin told the FBI the same thing he told us.
Kind of came a little more of a obsession with me on what I could possibly do.
Kilmartin says he got the missing flyer and a picture of Jacob so he could make copies and distribute them in all the towns he went to as a traveling disc jockey.
I felt like because I was so involved with the kids of the community, I just couldn't sit back and do nothing.
Now, consider another suspect, Newell Nelson. He has a stronger link to Minnesota. In 1988, he kidnapped and sexually abused a boy from Albert Lee. In March 1991, someone in Florida saw a man who looked like Nelson with a boy who looked like Jacob. Investigators learned Nelson had violated parole and was missing. They issued a national bulletin. Police picked up Nelson in Arizona, not with Jacob, but with another kidnapping victim, a 14-year-old boy.
Every year of Danny Heinrich's life is being scrutinized. Documents suggest one in particular was filled with turmoil. That year was 1989. And then 26-year-old Heinrich was having financial trouble. In March, his Mercury Topaz was repossessed. Investigators believe he used that car to sexually assault Jared Shirel in Cold Spring. Heinrich admitted to his attorney in a burglary case years prior he'd been having problems dealing with his parents' divorce. His mother remarried in July of 1989. And Heinrich stopped working at Finger Hut in St. Cloud on October 8th of that year, although it's unclear why.
There can be trigger events, be they positive or negative, which can kind of direct their behavior.
Former Brooklyn Park Police Chief Don Davis was not involved with the investigation into Jacob Wetterling's kidnapping, but in his 35 years in law enforcement, he knows a lot can be learned from the time leading up to a crime.
I equate it to shoplifting. The first time an individual shoplifts, they may take one item and it was really traumatizing, but the more they think about it, hey, it was rather easy, I'm going to do that again. Same thing with these child offenders.
Newspaper clippings, magazine articles.
Robert Dudley knows that time period well. He published a book about Jacob's abduction. sorting through 25 years of promising leads and dead ends.
The more questions he answered, the more questions there were.
Dudley felt like he never had many answers.
Danny James Heinrich was arrested pursuant to federal charges.
Until the news in October.
And there was just a slew of reported attempted abductions.
In his research, Dudley discovered in July of '89, 3 months before Jacob was kidnapped, a 9-year-old St. Joseph boy told police he ran from a man driving a light tan van who asked him to get inside. Authorities released this sketch of that man a week after Jacob went missing. If it is Heinrich, it's the only sketch of him with glasses, which he is usually pictured wearing. Some parents immediately called to say their kids saw that same man driving around St. Joseph that summer, snapping pictures. While we don't know if Heinrich had access to a van, WCCO found more recent records show Heinrich registered 8 cars in the past 11 years.
Perhaps one of the most telling pieces of all is the FBI profile they released of the suspect just 3 days after Jacob's kidnapping. A white male, 25 to 35 years old, employed in a low-skilled job. They believed he'd recently been through some sort of high-stress event in life that led to the high-risk way he kidnapped Jacob. They also thought the threat of a gun indicated he tried something like this before and failed.
To me, it's more than coincidence.
Davis says equally as important as what happened before is what happened immediately after. Sources told WCCO just this year investigators revisited Heinrich's connection to an early morning arson on November 12th of '89 at a home he was known to visit. It's the same date documents say Heinrich started a new job. 2 weeks later, Heinrich moved from his downtown Painesville apartment where he'd lived for years, 2 miles away, into his father's basement.
This new development in Minnesota's most notorious kidnapping case begins in the most unlikely of places.
It's really Minnesota's biggest mystery, I would say.
For 4 years, Joy Baker, a blogger from New London, Minnesota, has written a detailed blog about the Jacob Wetterling case. Last summer, her research uncovered articles in the Painesville Press from 1986 and 1987. They detail 6 unsolved sexual assaults on boys just 2 years before Jacob's abduction.
Police chief is asking for the public's help for finding this guy who's been assaulting and attacking these 12 to 16-year-old boys. So what went through my mind immediately is they have to be connected. How many psychopathic pedophiles can exist in a 20-mile radius?
Did you know about these cases?
We did not know until Joy Baker put it on her blog, and I was like, wow.
We showed Jacob's mother, Patty Wetterling, 2 of the original police reports from the Painesville attacks. Those reports, as well as the newspaper accounts, list a series of striking parallels with the Wetterling kidnapping. Jacob was abducted at 9 o'clock at night as he rode his bike home from a convenience store with his brother and friend. The Painesville attacks also happened at night as the victims are heading home. In 2 cases, boys are attacked while riding bikes. They're sexually assaulted. The attacker sometimes wears a mask, which in one case is described as made from candy-striped indoor-outdoor carpeting. He has a low, gruff voice, and he threatens the boys with a knife or a gun, saying he will blow their heads off.
Some of these were taken when they were together. It was from a group of boys, and that's really rare. The threat of a gun, the age of the victims is close to Jacob's. I do think there's a strong possibility that they could be connected. And
to Jacob's case.
To Jacob's case.
2 Painesville victims were questioned by law enforcement after Jacob disappeared. But another Painesville victim, who is now 40 and asked not to be named, said he and other victims he knows were never asked about Jacob. They feel that for years, their cases, both individually and as a group, were overlooked. Patty Wetterling says it's frustrating to learn so many years later about the Painesville cases, but she is also understanding.
It was a different world then. We didn't have the internet. We worked really hard to make sure that every law enforcement agency had a fax machine. They didn't even have that at that point.
The current Stearns County Sheriff John Saner agreed that the lack of internet and the fact that small-town law enforcement agencies often acted independently may have kept the Painesville cases from becoming a significant part of the Wetterling investigation. By phone, Sheriff Saner said, "We can't look back. We are actively investigating these cases now. We want anyone with any information to come forward, no matter how small. You could hold the key." But the sheriff stressed there is another unsolved case that investigators have always linked to the Wetterling abduction. Just months before Jacob disappeared, a stranger kidnapped a 12-year-old boy in nearby Cold Spring. His name is Jared.
This would be the area where I was dropped off and told to run, don't look back or he would shoot.
6 weeks after Jacob Wetterling was kidnapped, the FBI announced there was another victim.
And these facts match up with Jacob's abduction.
9 months before Jacob was taken, a 12-year-old boy named Jared was walking home at night in neighboring Cold Spring.
This guy stepped out of the vehicle, approached me from behind, said, "I have a gun, I'm not afraid to use it."
The man, who had a police scanner in his car, drove Jared to this remote site, sexually assaulted him, then let him go.
I was dropped off and told to run, don't look back or he would shoot.
It's a threat almost identical to the one described by Jacob's friend, Aaron.
He grabbed Jacob and then he told me to run as fast as I could into the woods or else he'd shoot.
For Jared, the weeks after the Wetterling abduction were filled with grueling interviews with law enforcement.
They brought me to a point where I broke down, where I mentally broke down, just physically exhausted, and I didn't have the answer, and they wanted the answer, and I couldn't provide that. So my parents made that decision that we should move.
Jared left Cold Spring, and for 25 years, anniversaries passed with no answers and no arrests.
I learned how to focus on other things.
But that changed last August when Jared was contacted by Joy Baker, the author of a detailed blog on the Wetterling case.
She says, are you the Jared I'm looking for?
Baker had uncovered newspaper articles about a series of sexual assaults in Painesville in 1986 and 1987. 2 years before Jared and Jacob's kidnappings. Painesville is just a few miles from where both boys were abducted, and the police reports and newspaper articles reveal striking parallels between the cases. The boys are attacked at night as they are heading home. Some are on bikes. They are sexually assaulted. The attacker wears a mask, has a low voice, and threatens victims with a knife or gun. Jared believes the same person who took him not only took Jacob, but is also behind the Painesville attacks.
When I first seen him, there was a big sigh. There's kind of like I'm not the only one that has made eye contact with this person.
For the past 9 months, Jared has worked with blogger Joy Baker to try and encourage witnesses to come forward.
It's just time for people to share their stories.
At the same time, he worries about the Painesville victims.
I apologize to all the victims for and people that we've already talked to or people that we're going to continue to talk to about bringing up 27-year-old repressed memories. Their involvement in this case could matter.
Over the years, Jared and Jacob's mother, Patty Wetterling, have become friends.
I'm so grateful for Jared and Joy digging.
She too is hoping someone will come forward for the Painesville victims, for Jared and for Jacob.
I do think there's a strong possibility that they could be connected. Every single one of these victims needs answers, and are they tied to Jacob? Let's find out. We've been gifted to receive it's just so much love and support, and it's been truly what sustains us.
Well, it also shows how strong Jacob's spirit is. I mean, that gunshot snuffed his breath out in October 22nd, '89, but his spirit is so strong, you can just see how it affects people.
Jerry and Patty Wetterling say it is Jacob's spirit that has also helped them cope.
For almost 27 years, we're searching, and then in 7 days, it was 8 total, it's over.
How are you doing?
That's the hardest question to answer.
You know, it's day to day.
It was just 6 weeks ago when they were first told of the possibility that Danny Heinrich, awaiting trial on child porn charges, might be willing to lead investigator to Jacob's body in exchange for a plea deal. The very next day, the Wetterlings agreed to the deal.
Was it a hard decision?
No, not really. For nearly 27 years, we've been looking for Jacob. We wanted to know, where's Jacob?
Less than 24 hours later, Patty Wetterling got a phone call from the lead prosecutor.
It was around noon, I think, when they found Jacob's jacket, which was heartbreaking to me. One thing that nobody will ever know is the intensity of these phone calls. To call Jerry and tell him it was hard. We later had to call our children and tell them that they'd found his jacket. And those were grueling phone calls to make. In all of these years, we've never had any piece of evidence to show Jacob was not alive.
They both went to the farm that day, staying only briefly.
We didn't go anywhere close to where they were digging, but Jacob wasn't alive there, and I didn't want to stay.
The next few days, more of Jacob's remains were found. On Labor Day, the family was given the details of Heinrich's confession, and the next day they heard Heinrich in court, in a matter-of-fact tone, explain how he abducted Jacob, handcuffed him, drove him to Painesville, molested him, and then shot him when he thought law enforcement was approaching.
I don't even know how to describe what it felt like hearing his words. When he came into the courtroom, all I could look at him and say is, how could you? It was actually absolutely stunning to try and process. How do you shift your head from hoping and searching and to now knowing that that he wasn't alive, and what a horrible death.
They both say they are not second-guessing law enforcement. Danny Heinrich was an early suspect, but dropped off investigators' radar for a quarter of a century.
It's so easy to look at a situation from today's perspective.
As for the future, the Wetterlings say they will continue their work on behalf of child safety and the work of the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center.
There's still a lot of work to do, and we're gaining strength to help, but we're just grateful for people who've carried us along the way.
Esme Murphy, WCCO 4 News.